So you've gotten to the very first step, contacting a vocalist, and now it's time to make our first really good impression. That is our goal here. That is what we want to do. We want to absolutely nail it so that this vocalist sees your message and says, oh my gosh, I have to work with this person. That is what we're going to accomplish in this video. Let's go. So there are a handful of ways that you can reach out to a vocalist. It's really not one size fits all kind of situation, but typically what people recommend, not just me, is to have a structure to your initial message when you reach out to a vocalist to really make it clear that you are someone they want to work with. Well, hi Fugu. Welcome to the video. You want to sell yourself with this first message. That is the most important thing to accomplish here. And it's easiest to start out with that by giving an honest compliment. You don't want to just throw a compliment out there like, hey, I love your work. That's a fine compliment, but it's a really generic compliment, and the chances are the vocalist that you're working with has heard that plenty of times. If you heard a specific track from the vocalist, for example, that you really liked their work on it and you thought it sounded amazing and that's why you want to work with this vocalist, tell them that. I've had a handful of people reach out to me and say, hey, I heard you on Hollywood's Bleeding. I absolutely loved your work there. You did a great job. I love the technique and the way your voice fits with it. I would really like to work on a track with you because I think your voice is going to be perfect for my project. That's a really good intro to what you're about to say about your track. Your message needs to be nice, it needs to be professional, and it needs to be actionable. The vocalist should be able to look at your message and not need to ask any questions in order to understand what you want from them. And it honestly should not be more than 2-ish paragraphs at the longest. And those are short paragraphs, like maybe 6 or 7 sentences total. So the next thing that you want to include in this initial message is information about yourself. You can't assume that someone's going to know who you are, so you need to give them the elevator pitch. You need to say, hi, I'm blank, insert compliment here if you have an honest compliment to put in, like, I heard you on Hollywood's Bleeding and I really loved your work. I think you would be perfect for my track. I produce X genres, I have X amount of streams, I have X releases with X labels, like, give some information about why you're the person this vocalist wants to work with. And I don't want this step to deter people who have very few followers or 0 releases or anything like that from working with a vocalist or contacting a vocalist. You just want to make sure you're giving the vocalist all of the information they need so that they know who you are as a producer and they know you are a reputable musician and person. Finally, the last thing that you want to include in this first message to your vocalist is the link to the track. If you already have the track ready for them to start recording vocals on it, by all means, please include a link. That way they can listen to the track, tell if they want to even work on it at all, and be able to give you a more informative answer. I can go in, I can hear if it's a quality track, I can hear if I'm vibing with it, I can start to think of cool ideas, and then we can start talking about a deal, which is our next step. If you don't have the track ready to go for the vocalist and you are either still working on it or you want to do something completely from scratch, tell them that in this first message. Hey, I would love to make a track from scratch with you. I would like it to be these kind of vibes or this theme or any other information that would be helpful in order for them to tell if this is a good project for them. That will really sell yourself, give the vocalist information about the track that you want to work on with them, and let that vocalist make an informed decision without needing to have an initial back and forth with you to even find out what you want them to work on. Make sure you go back and proofread the message just in case you have any spelling errors, and then send that off to the vocalist and give them time to respond. Depending on the vocalist you're reaching out to, there are a handful of reasons that you may not hear back from them for a little while or at all. First of all, if you don't hear back at all, it's probably because they're not interested or they never saw your message. That's why you want to make sure that you're reaching out on whatever platform they seem to be most active or wherever it would be most practical. And if that's an email, then send them an email. You may receive a lot of DMs or just not check them regularly, so it might take a little bit of time to see your message. Finally, it's possible that they're just taking time to listen through everything and really think about your track before they get back to you. The last thing that I want to say here is do not send 5 bajillion messages to the vocalist. I have had maybe 1 or 2 people in my entire career as a vocalist reach out to me multiple times on multiple platforms before I even got a chance to read their first message. They wanted to make sure they got my attention or whatever.
That's just annoying. Please don't do that.
It would be okay for you to reach out on 2 different platforms in case you send a message on the first platform and then realize they're just not active there anymore. But for me, like, I'm really active on Instagram. That's where I receive most of my DMs. But if you reach out on Instagram and then you send me an email and then you like find me on Reddit, please don't do that. Like, don't blow up my DMs on every single platform. It's not gonna make me pay attention to you. It's going to make me want to avoid you. So now that you've sent that first message, if the vocalist comes back and says, yes, I'd like to work with you on this track, we're going to move to step number 2. Here we are at step number 2. This is sealing the deal. Once you get that yes from your vocalist, now is the time to negotiate what the deal is going to be for this project. You want to make sure, as a producer working with a vocalist or literally anybody else in the music industry, if there is a deal involved with it, i.e. exchanging money, having a royalty split, featuring someone's name in your track, or writing them as a songwriter or anything else in the metadata, that's a deal. Now, I know a lot of people who prefer to negotiate on the back end once the project is finished, but that's a very bad idea, and that is just not a way to maintain a relationship with someone, especially if you want to work with this vocalist again. You always want to negotiate first. That is the way that I work with my producers. I always make sure that we have a deal in writing, ready to go before I even get started on the project, so that we know what to expect before we publish anything. This is very important because in this day and age, metadata is everything. And metadata is all of the information when you're on Spotify and you click show credits, where it says the songwriters, it says performed by. Those are all pieces of metadata. Those are the things that earn you money and define you as a musician. You need to make sure you have the deal for this project completely negotiated and finished before anybody gets started. So the first thing that I want to talk about in negotiating is that the vocalist may charge a fee. If they do ask you for a fee and you didn't plan on paying for the vocalist, you can let them know that you were looking to work with them for free, but it's very possible that they'll tell you they just won't work with you because they can't take on an unpaid project. A lot of the time, if a vocalist charges a fee, which could just be money up front, or it could be money and royalties, or it could just be a royalty split that they're looking for, it really varies from person to person, and it's also going to vary depending on the vocalist's experience. That is sometimes something that you can negotiate, and don't be afraid to attempt to negotiate. There's really nothing you can lose by saying that you would like to negotiate that price, or you were hoping to have a lower price. Anything like that is fine for you to say to a vocalist, but make sure that when you are saying something like that, you're being kind, you're putting yourself in their shoes, and you're not being cheap. It would be okay for you to come back and say, my budget for a vocalist on this project is, let's take just $100 as an example number here. Sometimes vocalists charge way more than that, and sometimes that's fairly run-of-the-mill for a vocalist. Always take that number into consideration and don't just throw it out thinking that that's way too much to charge for vocals. You want to be fair when you're negotiating. Don't come in and completely lowball them and tell them that you don't want to pay more than that because that's way too much money for vocals. That's rude, first of all. You are not the person who determines how much vocals cost because you're not the vocalist. That's why you're reaching out to a vocalist in the first place. If they don't initially tell you a number, still take into consideration both sides. What do you offer? What do they offer? What is your budget for this track? What do they typically charge for a track? I've had a lot of situations where I will tell a producer what I charge and the producer will come back and say, okay, well, I was hoping to not pay for this and just split royalties on the back end. That is a standard thing that people do nowadays and do a 50-50 royalty split instead of having any payment. And it's really going to vary from vocalist to vocalist whether they consider royalties to be a part of the negotiations. You will need to determine royalties up front, but it is very possible that a vocalist will not reduce their fee simply because you're offering royalties. The risk of taking on a project with just a royalty split for a vocalist is a very, very, very big risk. Anytime I take on a project where I'm splitting royalties 50-50, I just assume I'm not going to make any money from it. There's no guarantee that you're going to make royalties, and that makes it a very weak thing to negotiate with. Unless you're basically guaranteed to make a decent amount of money from royalties on every single one of your releases. There's no guarantee. That's just the way it works. It's not the vocalist being mean to you, it's not the vocalist saying that you're a nobody and you have no followers and you should stop doing music. It's being smart. You'll want to make sure you have the final negotiated deal in writing, either on Instagram, via email, through your platform, wherever you're communicating with the vocalist. Any of that is fine as long as there is a permanent record of the deal that you guys came up with. And that deal should include the deadline for the project, or deadlines if there are multiple. I always recommend having some kind of deadline. It could be a target date if you don't have an exact date, but if you say, I want to have this done within the next month, make sure that is written down. The second thing that needs to be in the deal is the price for the project. If the vocalist has asked for a certain price and you agree to pay it, you should have that in writing. The next thing is royalties. If you guys are going to have a royalty split, that is the third thing that you need to have as part of the final deal. And finally, you need to have whether or not you are going to be featuring the vocalist's name on the track, or however you're going to be using their name. And I want to put a little asterisk next to the feature portion of the deal, because sometimes for projects that I take on personally, I don't know if other vocalists do this, but sometimes I will tell a producer that I will determine if they can feature my name on the track after the track is finished. And the reason that I do that is because sometimes I work with producers who are pretty new to the music scene and they just don't have a lot of music released yet. I will let them know that I will determine whether or not they can feature my name once the track is finished, because I want to make sure that they've done a good job with the production, the mixing, and the mastering after it's done, in order for me to sign off on putting my name on that track. Because if you think about it, anytime I, as Mary Sweet, the vocalist, put my name on somebody else's track, I am saying, I stand behind this track, I support it, and I think it's good. So if I do that with a track that is not well done and not well mixed or mastered, then that is me telling the world that this is the level of quality that I stand behind. You always want to make sure that you're putting yourself in the vocalist's shoes if they're asking for something that you typically would not have expected on a project, or if it's just something that takes you by surprise. That's okay, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to try to negotiate things appropriately and fairly. But don't be rude, don't be inconsiderate, and don't be cheap. And hold up your end of the deal, be professional, and you will have really good experiences with vocalists. Finally, we've made it to the actual project where we can get started working with this amazing vocalist on your amazing track. And there are some things that we need to make sure we do correctly during this portion of the process. That first thing that we want to do is set expectations. This is separate from negotiating the deal, because these are the expectations for your actual communication and back and forth and while the vocalist is working on your project. You want to make sure that up front you set expectations for how often you want to hear back from the vocalist, when you want to be able to approve certain portions of the track, and what kind of feedback you'll be looking for from the vocalist, if any. Most often, it'll be you giving the vocalist feedback, but if you are looking for feedback, let the vocalist know so that they can take that into consideration while they're working on your track. You and the vocalist are going to be the people who know this track the best. The first expectation that you want to set is the amount of contact. If you want to hear back from the vocalist every couple of days, or every time they work on the project, or once a week, let them know, If you don't have any expectations regarding communication, then that's fine to leave it out. I typically, as the vocalist, will tell the producer when I'm going to be communicating with them and when they'll hear from me next, so that they always know what to expect moving forward, so that I don't have them reaching out to me 10 hours later and saying, hey, I haven't heard from you, are you still working on my project or have you ghosted me? That's the reason that I set expectations from my side to begin with. Another thing that you want to talk about is turning points. One of the things that I do for every single project where I'm working with a new producer that I haven't worked with before is I let them know what the turning points are in the process of the project. Once we've negotiated the deal and I'm able to get started on the project, I'll send an initial demo that usually has the first verse and the chorus to the producer just with the lead vocal so that they can hear my idea for the project and give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down and provide additional feedback to guide me as I continue to work on the project afterward. My next step is to finish recording the entire lead vocal so that the producer can hear all of the lyrics and all of the lead melody and be able to give another thumbs up or thumbs down and additional feedback, any tweaks that they want me to make. Then I will go back through and record stacks, harmonies, ad-libs, anything else that I deem appropriate for the track or that we've agreed on as part of the deal to begin with. I'll send that full demo with all of the stems that they'll receive. They can let me know if there's anything that really needs to be tweaked before I send it to them, and then I will send all of the stems. It is industry standard for you as the producer to expect to receive dry 24-bit wave stems from a vocalist if the vocalist has the ability to produce stems like that. If you receive the stems from the vocalist and they're not the quality that you were looking for to begin with, let them know so that they can go back through and make any changes that are necessary before they resend you the stems. Another little thing that I want to talk about in here is feedback. I've been mentioning this word a lot, feedback, and this is something that is crucial to defining your experience with this vocalist and determining how good the vocals are going to be that you receive in the end. Feedback is what's going to drive this project forward and either drive it off the rails or drive it in the right direction. Whenever you're giving feedback, you need to make sure that you're being kind and professional and descriptive. If there's a specific word that you would like the vocalist to sing in a different tone or at a different volume or on a different note, give a time, give the note or the volume or a comparison to another vocalist that is very similar. Or if you're looking for the vibe in a certain portion of the lyrics to change, send a reference track. Give as much information as you can possibly give so that the vocalist can nail it the second time around if they didn't do it the first time. If you don't give enough information, then you're probably not going to get exactly what you were looking for when the vocalist redoes it. I have received plenty of vague feedback in my day. I'm going to put a couple of examples up on the screen here so that you guys can see an example of good feedback, an example of bad feedback, and understand why one is good and why one is bad so that you know what to do when it comes to giving feedback. And finally, now that you and the vocalist have completed this project together, we're going to move on to the publishing portion of it so that we can wrap up this video and talk about the final steps before you get to share your amazing work with the world. So, we made it. We are at the publication step. Finally, we are finished doing this track between you and the vocalist, and you are ready to submit it to platforms. Here is what you need to make sure happens in order to maintain the relationship with your vocalist and to make sure that everything goes smoothly. First and foremost, and seemingly most obvious, is format the title of the song correctly. And make sure that if you're featuring the name of the vocalist, you feature their name the way that you agreed on to begin with. The second thing you want to do is follow the deal you set. This includes making sure you've featured the name of the vocalist or not featured it and done that correctly, And it also includes making sure that when you're uploading the track to a platform or just releasing it yourself, you're giving the proper credit in the different portions of the song's metadata. Now, we've talked about metadata before in this video, where you go into Spotify and you go and show credits, and then it shows whoever performed it, whoever wrote it, and other information about the track. This is where, once you're uploading it through your distributor or sending it to a label, that you need to make sure all of this information is correct. It can be much harder to fix it once you realize that you made a mistake and you need to go back and fix it after the song has been released. So format everything correctly. Make sure that if the vocalist also wrote the lyrics for the song, they have to be in there as a songwriter. They are a songwriter. It's not just you, it's both of you. If you are just featuring the vocalist and you as the producer wrote all of the lyrics and the vocal melody, then the vocalist is not a writer in the track unless they helped you with it. Once you've finished the track completely and you have a mastered version, make sure that you send a downloadable link to the vocalist wherever you were communicating so that they have a copy of the track for their records, especially if they request it explicitly. A teeny little side note here is please avoid sending the actual file, whether MP3 or WAV, to the vocalist via email. Depending on the vocalist that you're working with, it's very possible that they receive a lot of emails from people who want to work with them, or they receive a lot of emails where they're sending tracks back and forth, and it is always very helpful to receive a link like from WeTransfer or Soundcloud or Dropbox or Clip or another website where it's really easy to preview your track and to listen to your track and to download your track without actually having the WAV file in an email. That's a really big email, and it takes up a lot of space, and it's really inconvenient for somebody to receive so many emails on a regular basis with huge files. It just takes up so much space, and it makes it really difficult to make sure your inbox doesn't overflow. There has been a situation before, which I just found utterly ridiculous, where when I requested the final version of the track so that I had a copy of it from my discography, the producer told me that I could go buy it on iTunes or Google Play.
Like,
wow.
That's just stupid.
And the final thing that I want to talk about, which is a bonus topic, is over asking.
my favorite.
There have been very few situations where I have encountered this problem with a producer when I worked with them on a track, but let me tell you that anytime I do encounter this problem, it is a nightmare. What I mean by over asking is if when you first negotiated the deal with the vocalist didn't specifically offer to send the track to labels or to advertise it on their social media or anything else like that, the vocalist has no obligation to do any of that. You hired this vocalist to write lyrics and sing vocals for your track.
Or just sing vocals.
But regardless, that is what you hired them for. Do not get to the end of the track and then ask them to do more. So my phone died.
Oops.
But that is everything that I wanted to talk about for this particular YouTube video. That wraps up all of my points, and I really hope you guys have learned something and will go out into the world and be amazing producers when it comes to working with vocalists. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments or send me a DM on Instagram or anything like that, and I'll be happy to answer. So good luck with all of that. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. Please be sure to subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Instagram, because those are the two places that I'm going to be most active and posting the most content. And then feel free to pop over to Spotify as well and toss me a follow if you're interested in listening to my music. There will be a whole lot more YouTube videos coming soon. Make sure that you've done all of those things to be able to keep up with me, and Fugu and I will see you later. See you guys!